Good morning and welcome to the Introduction to English Speech Sounds under Modern English Structure. Today we shall be talking about the English consonants. There are 24 consonantal sounds in English language, and the three-term label that is used to describe a consonantal sound could be number 1, voiced or voiceless depending upon the position of the vocal cords. If they are very close to each other, the air has to pass through it, causing them into motion and friction, and hence voiced sounds are produced. If the vocal cords are widely separated and widely open, the air can pass through it freely, thereby producing the voiceless sounds. This becomes the first important term to describe a consonantal sound, whether the sound is voiced, where the vocal cords vibrate, or whether the sound is voiceless, where the vocal cords do not vibrate. The second term to describe a consonantal sound is the place of articulation within the articulatory system. As we discussed, the articulatory system is in the oral cavity of the human being with the active articulators which belong to the organs of the lower jaw, because the lower jaw can move. So you have the lower lip, lower teeth, and the dance master, the tongue, belonging to the active articulators. And then we have the passive articulators. The organs within the mouth that are present in the upper jaw are called as the passive articulators, because the jaw as such, the upper jaw as such cannot move. So the upper lip, upper teeth, the hard bony structure beneath the teeth called the teeth ridge, and the hard concave structure which separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity, which is called as the hard palate, that culminates into a soft hanging structure called the soft palate, constitute the passive articulators. The place of articulation would mean which active articulator is articulating with which passive articulator to produce the sound. Accordingly, if the lips are involved in the production of the sound, we call it as bilabial. Bi is two, labial is lips. If the lips and the teeth are involved in the production of the sound is called as labiodental. Labio is lips, dental is teeth. If only teeth are involved in the production of the sounds are described as dental sounds. If the teeth ridge is involved in the production of the sound, it's called alveolar sound. If the posterior region of the alveolar ridge or the teeth ridge is involved in the production of the sound, it is called post-alveolar sound. If the hard palate is involved in the production of the sound, it is called palatal sound. If the alveolar ridge and the hard palate are involved in the production of the sound, they are called palato-alveolar sounds. And if the soft palate is involved in the production of the sound, it is called glottal sound. So, depending upon the place of articulation, the sound can be described like bilabial, labiodental, dental, alveolar, postalveolar, palato-alveolar, palatal, velar, and glottal. The third criteria to describe the consonantal sound is the manner of articulation. The manner of articulation tells us exactly the structure or the way in which the air that is coming out from the lungs passes through the mouth or through the nose. If the air is held up for some time and then comes out with an explosive sound, it is called as plosive. If the air is held up within the oral cavity but it comes out slowly, it's called affricate. If the air is not held up in the oral cavity but passes through the narrow passage between the active and the passive articulator, causing audible friction, it's called fricative. If the air passes through the nose, the sounds are called as nasal sounds. If the air passes through the sides or rims of the tongue, they are called as the lateral sounds. If the air coming out from the lungs passes through without any friction, it's called frictionless continuant. And if the air is passing through, just like as we find in vowels and making up the glides, these sounds are called as semivowels. So the manner of articulation is very important, and accordingly we have plosives, affricates, fricatives, nasals, laterals, frictionless continuants, and semivowels. So these are the three-term label to describe a consonantal sound: voiced or voiceless, place of articulation, and manner of articulation. We shall be dividing all the consonantal sounds in English according to the manner of articulation and discuss in the coming slides. The very first manner of articulation is plosive. Let's understand what a plosive is. A plosive consonant is produced by a complete closure of the nasal cavity due to the raise of the soft palate. So the air coming out from the lungs has to pass through the mouth only. But within the oral cavity also, we find a complete closure of the oral passage by a firm contact being made between the active and the passive articulators in the oral cavity. So the air is blocked to pass through the nose, the air also is blocked to pass through the mouth. As a result, the holding of the closure and the compression of the air coming from the lungs takes place in the oral cavity. When the active articulator gets separated from the passive articulator, the air is suddenly released with a slight explosive sound, and hence the sounds are called as plosives. There are 6 plosive sounds in English: p, b, t, d, k and g. Let us discuss each of these sounds with respect to the place of articulation and manner of articulation. The very first set of sounds is p and b, of which p is the first one. P. Close your lips. P as in pen. The articulation point of view, the soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. A complete closure is formed in the oral cavity by a firm contact made by both the lips, so that the air pressure is built behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity. When the mouth closure is released, that is, when the active articulator, the lower lip, gets separated from the passive articulator, that is the upper lip, the air that is held up and compressed in the oral cavity is suddenly released with an explosive sound. Hence, it is called as a plosive. The vocal cords are held apart when the sound is produced. So, the 3-term label for the production of p sound is voiceless because the vocal cords do not vibrate, bilabial because the place of articulation is 2 lips, and plosive because the manner of articulation is a compression of the air and a sudden release with explosion. Distribution wise, the consonant p occurs in the word initial, as you could find in PET, pet, medial position, as you find in SPIN, spin, and final position, as we find in the example of TIP, tip. The examples for practicing p sound are as following. Before we go ahead to the examples, there is an important rule in English when p, t and k, all the 3 are plosives that we are going to study in this video. So, the p sound is what the sound we are dealing with, followed by t and then k. All these are voiceless plosives because the vocal cords do not vibrate and they are pronounced very soft. But when p, t, k occur in the word initial position of an accented syllable, they are uttered with a slight h sound. H. It should not be so distinct that h is to be pronounced with a greater emphasis, but slight h sound is to be audible while you are pronouncing the words, where p, t and k sounds occur in the word initial position of the accented syllable. Accordingly, the puff of air of h sound will create a characteristic feature for the pronunciation, which is called as aspiration. Aspiration is a very interesting and important feature of English pronunciation. So, P-E-E-L, the first word that is there in your example set, is not pronounced as peel, but is pronounced with a slight h sound because p is present in the initial position. So, it is not peel, it is peel. Consciously incorporate the h sound so that the pronunciation will have the aspiration within it. Similarly is P-I-L-L, pill, P-E-N-C-I-L, pencil, P-A-C-K, pack, P-A-S-S, pass, P-O-C-K-E-T, pocket, P-A-W, paw, P-U-L-L, pull. P-O-O-L, pool. P-E-E-C-H, peach. P-U-B-L-I-C, public. P-U-R-S-E, purse. P-A-I-L, pale. P-O-S-T, post. P-I-E, pie. P-O-W-E-R, power. P-O-I-N-T, point. P-I-E-R, peer. P-A-I-R, pair. P-O-U-R, poor. P-O-O-R, poor. C-A-P-A-B-L-E. Now here per is not present in the word initial position, ker is present. So ker is to be accented and per is not to be accented or maybe aspirated. So it is capable. H-A-P-P-Y. P is not in the initial position, so don't accent it. Don't aspirate it. Happy. P-E-P-P-E-R. Per sound occurs at two places. The first per is to be accented and aspirated. The second is not to be accented, not to be aspirated. So pepper, pepper. P-E-O-P-L-E. The same logic here also. People. L-I-P. Per sound is present in the word final position. So the rule doesn't apply. It's lip. M-A-P. Map. S-P-O-O-N, spoon, not to be aspirated because the word begins with s sound. S-P-E-N-D, spend. S-P-O-T, spot. That's good. So, per sound is to be aspirated. Per, ter, ker are to be aspirated when they occur in the initial position of the accented syllable. Very nice. The next sound is a counterpart of per, which is called as bur. In the articulation wise, bur is exactly like bur. So the soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. A complete closure is formed in the oral cavity by a firm contact made by both the lips, so that the air pressure is built behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity. When the mouth closure is released, the air held up is then suddenly released with an explosive sound. The vocal cords vibrate when the sound is pronounced. This is the difference between per and bur. For per, the vocal cords do not vibrate, but for bur, the vocal cords vibrate. So the three-term label for bur, as in B-E-S-T, best, is voiced, vocal cords vibrate, bilabial, both the lips are involved, plosive, the air is held up and released with explosion. Understood? Distribution-wise, bur sound occurs in all the three positions in English words. The initial position as in B-A-T, bat. Medial position as in the word A-B-O-U-T, about. And final position as in the word R-U-B, rub. That's right. The examples for practice is B-E-E, B. B-I-D, bid. B-E-D, bed. B-A-D, bad. B-A-R-K, bark. B-O-X, box. B-O-U-G-H-T, the long one, bought. B-U-L-L, bull. B-O-O-T, the long one, boot. B-U-D, bud, the central vowel. B-U-R-N, burn, the central long vowel. B-A-Y, bay. B-O-A-T, boat. From here onwards, you have the diphthongs beginning. If you look at the words, you could find that the sound is in combination with all the 20 vowels, which will be a wonderful practice not only for this sound of consonant but also for all the vowels. So B-A-Y, bay, diphthong. B-O-A-T, boat, O is the diphthong used. B-U-Y, buy, I is the diphthong used. B-O-U-G-H, bow. B-O-Y, boy, oi is the diphthong used. B-E-E-R, beer. B-E-A-R, bear. B-O-A-R, boa. B-O-O-R, pronunciation is the same, boa. R-O-B-I-N, robin. B-U-B-B-L-E, bubble. W-E-B, web. O-C-T-O-B-E-R, October. Note that t is accented and t is aspirated here, whereas k is not. B-U-L-B, bulb. T-R-I-B-E, tribe. T is aspirated. B-O-M-B, bomb. C-O-M-B, comb. L-A-M-B, lamb. And D-E-B-T, dead. B is silent here. Very nice. Look at this diagram. This diagram exactly helps us to pronounce p and b sounds appropriately. You could see that the hard palate is tapering into soft palate, and the soft palate is raised to touch the nasal passage of air, so it is blocking the air. The air coming from the lungs has to pass through the mouth as is shown through the arrows. In the oral cavity, it is stopped because both the lips are completely in contact with each other with a complete closure structure. Did you notice? So the air is held up here and compressed for some time till the lower lip gets separated from the upper lip, so that the air coming of the lungs held up within the oral cavity comes out with an explosive sound, thereby producing p and b. P is voiceless, vocal cords do not vibrate, and b is voiced because the vocal cords vibrate. Understood? Very good. Let's go down to the next set, t and d. T as in T-E-N, ten. What happens while the sound is pronounced? The soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. A complete closure is formed in the oral cavity by a firm contact made between the tip and blade of the tongue and the teeth ridge. Did you notice? The tip of the tongue touches the teeth ridge and completes or blocks the oral passage, so that the air pressure is built behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity. When the mouth closure is released, that is, the tip of the tongue is separated from the teeth ridge, the air that is held up is then suddenly released with an explosive sound. T. Put your tongue and touch the teeth ridge. Stop the air for some time. Release the tongue so that you pronounce T. Fine? The vocal cords are held apart when the sound is produced, so it is voiceless. So the three-term label for T as in T-E-N 10 is voiceless because the vocal cords do not vibrate, alveolar because the tip of the tongue touches the alveolar ridge or the teeth ridge, plosive because the oral cavity is blocked, the air is held up and suddenly released with an explosive sound. Distribution-wise, T sound occurs in all the three positions in English words as T-E-N, 10, initial position, A-T-T-E-N-D, attend, medial position, T-E-X-T, text, final position. The rule that we discussed called aspiration under P sound also is applied to T sound. Actually speaking, P as well as T are voiceless. Vocal cords do not vibrate. The sounds are comparatively softer. But when they occur in the initial position of the accented syllables, they are to be uttered with a slight h sound. So it is not T-E-N 10, it is 10. It is not T-E-X-T text, but it is text. Let's apply this rule and try to pronounce the examples. T-E-E. T-E-A is T. T-I-N. That's right. Tin. Give a slight h sound, which is called aspiration, which gives the characteristic expression of English speech. T-E-double-L. Tell. Good. A-double-T-A-C-K. Attack. Attack. T is aspirated. Did you notice? That's right. Say these examples along with me and practice well. T-A-S-K, task, task. T-O-P, top. T-A-L-K, talk, the long back vowel. T-double-O-K, took. T-W-O, two. Yes, the long back vowel, ooh sound. T-U-M-B-L-E, tumble, the central vowel. T-U-R-N, turn, the central long vowel. From hereafter, you would find the diphthongs. T-A-K-E, take. A is the diphthong used. T-O-A-S-T, toast. T-I-M-E, time. T-O-Y, toy. T-O-W-N, town. T-E-A-R as a noun, which means Asu Bahana, it's Tia. T-E-A-R as a verb, it means Far dena, Tea. Ea is the diphthong that is used here as a verb. Ia is the diphthong that is used as a noun. T-O-U-R, tua. Ua is the diphthong that is used. T-O-R-E, toa. W-R-I-T-I-N-G, writing. Writing. G is never pronounced in the word final. Writing. W-A-T-E-R, water. The R sound, E-R, A-R, O-R. Whenever they occur in the word final position, R sound is never pronounced. So it is not water, it is water. Water. That's right. N-A-T-I-V-E, native. T-H-E-A-T-R-E, theatre. P-O-T-A-T-O, potato. Potato. C-O-N-S-T-I-T-U-T-E, constitute. Constitute. P-R-I-N-T, print. P-R-O-F-I-T, profit. D-O-U-B-T, doubt. T-E-L-L-E-R, teller. Teller, with aspiration. That's right. The next counterpart of T is D sound, as in D-E-E-P, deep. The articulation of T and D is exactly the same, excepting that D has the vocal cords vibrating and T doesn't have the vocal cords vibrating. So during the articulation of D sound, the soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. A complete closure is formed in the oral cavity by a firm contact made between the tip and blade of the tongue and the teeth ridge, so that the air pressure is built behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity. When the mouth closure is released, the air held up is then suddenly released with an explosive sound. That's very important to make it a plosive. The vocal cords for the production of D sound is vibrating, and hence the sound is produced as voiced. So the three-term label for describing D sound, as in D-E-E-P, deep, is voiced because the vocal cords are vibrating, alveolar because the alveolar ridge or the teeth ridge is involved in the production of the sound, and plosive because the air is held up in the oral cavity and is released with explosive sound. Distribution-wise, D sound occurs in all the three word positions in English. As you could see in D-O-N-E, done, it occurs in the initial position. A-D-D-I-T-I-O-N, addition, it occurs in the medial position. And M-A-D-E, made, D occurs in the word final position. The examples for D sound is D-E-A-L, deal. Listen to this pronunciation and repeat after me. D-I-D, did. D-A-S-H, dash. D-A-R-K, dark. D-O-G, dog. D-O-O-R, door. D-O-O-M, doom, the back long vowel. D-U-S-T, dust. D-I-R-T, dirt, the central long vowel. D-A-T-E, date, the diphthongs begin. D-O-M-E, dome. O is the sound. D-I-N-E, dine. D-E-A-R, dare. D-A-R-E, dare. D-E-A-R is deer, the animal. Okay. D-A-R-E is dare. H-I-D-I-N-G, hiding. L-O-U-D-E-R, louder. Ow is the diphthong used. G-A-R-D-E-N, garden. Garden. D sound and N sound immediately. The R letter before the consonantal sound is never pronounced. This is the second rule for R. When R occurs in the word final position, it is never pronounced. When R occurs in the spelling before the consonantal sounds, it is never pronounced. So it is not garden, it is garden. Garden. That's right. middle, middle. It is not middle, but it is middle. Immediately after d, the l sound is there because l functions as a syllabic consonant. I hope you remember the concept of syllabic consonant. The same rule applies for garden. N also is syllabic consonant. Middle, l also is syllabic consonant. Lead as a verb is lead. One who leads is a leader. Lead as a noun is a chemical, lead. The lead pencil. So it's not the lead pencil, it is the lead pencil that you have to ask when you go into a stationery shop. Hard, hard. Load, load. Wood, wood. Mad, mad. Said, said. Kindle, kindle. K is to be aspirated. After d, it is immediately l because l is syllabic consonant. So it is kindle, kindle addition. Cuddle, k is to be aspirated, cuddle. Redden, redden. And debt, debt. B sound is silent here. If you have the diagrammatic representation of t and d, this is the diagram. The soft palate touches the teeth ridge, and the soft palate touches is raised and is blocking the nasal passage of air. The tip of the tongue is touching the teeth ridge. Could you see that in the diagram? Thereby blocking the oral passage of air. So the air that is coming out from the lungs shown in arrows is stopped there, held within the oral cavity for some time. When the tip of the tongue, the active articulator, gets separated from the passive articulator, which is the teeth ridge, the air goes out with an explosive sound. Hence, they are plosives. Because the teeth ridge or the alveolar ridge is involved in the production of the sounds, it's called alveolar sounds. Very good. Let's move ahead to the next set. K and G. K as in K-E-E-P, keep. Now, the rule of aspiration applies here also. So, P, T, K. To these three sounds, the rule of aspiration applies. So, it is not just keep, it is keep. A slight h sound is to be heard. During the articulation of this sound k, the soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. A complete closure is formed in the oral cavity by a firm contact made between the back of the tongue and the tip of the soft palate, which is also called as velum, and hence they are called velar sounds. So that the air pressure is built behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity for some time. When the mouth closure is released, that is when the back of the tongue, which is the active articulator, is released from the passive articulator, which becomes the soft palate or the velum, the air held up is then released suddenly with an explosive sound, and hence it is called as plosive. The vocal cords are held apart when the sound is pronounced, and so the three-term label for k, as in K-E-E-P, keep, is voiceless because the vocal cords do not vibrate, velar because the soft palate or the tip of the soft palate called velum is involved in the production of the sound, and plosive because the air coming out from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity and is released with an explosive sound later. Distribution wise, the consonant k occurs in all the three positions. The word initial position as you find in CUP, cup. The word medial position as we find in STICKER, sticker. And final position as we find in NECK, neck. In the word initial position, it is aspirated, but the sound is not aspirated in the medial position and the final position. Take a very good care of this. Otherwise, you might mispronounce those sounds and words. Let's look at some examples. All these where k sound occurs in the initial position are to be aspirated. Consciously bring in this notion of aspiration for p, t, k production of sounds. K-E-Y, key. K-I-L-L, kill. Listen to the pronunciation and repeat after me. K-E-T-T-L-E, kettle. C-A-T, cat. C-A-R-T, cart. C-O-L-L-A-R, collar. C-U-S-H-I-O-N, cushion. C-O-O-L, curl. C-U-T, cut. C-U-R-L, curl. C-A-R-V-E, carve. C-O-L-D, cold. K-I-N-D, kind. C-O-W, cow. C-O-I-L, coil. K-I-E-R, Kia. C-A-R-E, care. C-O-A-R-S-E, curse. C-O-U-R-S-E, curse. The R is not pronounced. A-C-R-E, acre. It's the unit of measurement. Acre. C-O-O-K-I-N-G, cooking. The first K is aspirated, the second K is not aspirated. Cooking. R-O-C-K-Y, rocky. In all this, where K sound occurs in the medial position or in the final position, K is not aspirated. C-A-K-E, the first K is aspirated, the second K is not aspirated. Cake. P-A-C-K, pack. Here P is aspirated because P occurs in the initial position of the accented syllable. Pack. D-U-K-E, duke. K-I-L-L, kill. K is aspirated. B-A-C-K, back. C-A-K-E, cake. The first is aspirated, the second is not. And C-O-M-E, come. Come. Very good. Repeat the examples again and practice for a better understanding of the sound with aspiration. The counterpart of K is G. G as you find in G-U-N, gun. For the articulation of G sound, it's exactly similar to that of K. The soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. The complete closure is observed in the oral cavity by a firm contact being made between the back of the tongue and the tip of the soft palate called as the velum, so that the air pressure is built behind the closure and the air coming from the lungs is held up in the oral cavity for some time. When the mouth closure is released, that is when the back of the tongue, which is the active articulator, separates from the passive articulator, which is the soft palate or the tip of the soft palate called velum, the air held up is then suddenly released within the explosive sound. The vocal cords vibrate when the sound is produced. So the three-term label for describing the G sound is it's a voiceless because the vocal cords, it is voiced because the vocal cords vibrate. It is velar because the soft palate or velum is involved in the production of it, and it is plosive because the air is held up within the oral cavity and is released with a sudden explosive sound. I'm sorry, over here it is voiced. Distribution wise, the consonant G occurs in the word initial, medial and final positions in English. As you find in the examples, G-A-M-E, game, initial position. A-G-A-I-N, again, medial position, and D-O-G, dog, final position. The examples practicing for G sound are as following. Repeat after me for practice. G-E-E-S-E, geese. G-I-V-E, give. G-U-E-S-S, guess. G-A-S, gas. All these four are front vowels. Did you notice? G-U-A-R-D, guard. G-O-T, got. G-U-A-Z-E, gauze. G-O-O-D, good. G-O-O-S-E, goose. Now these 5 examples later are involved in the incorporation of the back vowels. Did you notice? A, O, U and oo. Come down to the next example. G-U-M, gum. G-I-R-L, girl. These two involve the central vowels, sound and sound. G-A-T-E, gate. Diphthongs begin from here. G-O-A-T, goat. G-U-I-D-E, guide. G-O-W-N, gown. G-E-A-R, gear. E-A-G-E-R, eager. Tiger, tiger. Organ, organ. R is not pronounced before the consonantal sound. Organ. Sugar, sugar, sugar. Big, big. Final positions. Egg, egg. Log, log. Mug, mug. Gather, gather. Grows, grouse. Gravy, gravy, gravy. Beggar, beggar. Shrug, shrug. And hug, hug. In all these examples, the g sound occurs in the word final position. Diagrammatic representation of k and g will be as following. The soft palate is raised to shut off the nasal passage of air. The air coming from the lungs has to pass through the mouth. The oral cavity also is shut off, where the back of the tongue makes a contact with the soft palate or the velum, thereby blocking the air and compressing it and holding it for some time. When the active articulator, the back of the tongue, gets separated from the passive articulator, that is the soft palate or velum, the air that is compressed comes out with an explosive sound, thereby producing the plosive. K and g. For the production of k, the vocal cords are held wide apart, so it's voiceless, and for the production of g, the vocal cords vibrate, and so it is voiced. So k is voiceless, velar plosive, g is voiced, velar plosive. Thus, English language has got six plosives, p and b. P and b are bilabial plosives, t and d are alveolar plosives, and k and g are velar plosives, of which p, t, k are voiceless, but they have a special feature called aspiration in English, which is the pronunciation of slight h sound when these sounds p, t, k occur in the initial position of the accented syllable. B, d, g are voiced sounds, right? P and b are bilabial, t and d are alveolar, k and g are velar. All the six manner of articulation wise are plosives. Thus is the discussion of plosives in English. Thank you very much for being a part of this presentation. I hope you had enjoyed it. Listen to it again and practice for a proper understanding of the pronunciation of the sounds and also the examples of the sounds. Bye for now. Stay tuned for the next video.